News First, Newsline with Faraz Shaukat Ali on TV1.
And very good evening to you and a warm welcome to Newsline. Back in 1947, oops, Newsline's gone all the way back there. But honestly, back in 1947, today, on the 14th of August, marked the independence of India, the exit of the British, the colonial rulers, and India was divided. India was split into three parts, West Pakistan, East Pakistan, and India in the middle. And tonight, unfortunately, on that day in 1947, on the 14th of August, it is estimated that between 200,000 and 2 million people lost their lives, and around 10 million people were displaced. And it is sad that not many people remember this awful and ghastly event that took place all those years ago. And I'd like to pay tribute to all those who died in that ghastly exercise of division there, and that we remember what happened. And it's something that I suppose we should all learn from. And this is one of those drawbacks that happened with colonial rule and so on and so forth. And eventually, of course, this Bangladesh came into being, because you simply can't divide one country into two parts and have another country in the middle. Still, that's what happened back in 1947. And I'm deeply indebted to a friend of mine who sent me that information in the last few minutes and who reminded me about that last event. He himself is now taking up employment in Pakistan soon, and we'll tell you all about that another time, another program. My guest this evening is the CEO of the Advocata Institute, Dhananath Fernando, and I thought we'd ask him whether the farmers' problems out there is also our problem here in Colombo. Let's find out, shall we? Good evening to you, Dhananath Fernando.
Good evening, Faraz.
Is it true, though, this problem of, barren lands, lack of water affecting the farmers out there, is it also our problem here in Colombo?
Absolutely, Faraz. It's everyone's problem
Right.
for multiple reasons. One is, if you even look at from the point of view of the food security, that affects everyone. And even if you go back to 2016-17, then there was a drought. This is not a drought yet. Hopefully it won't be. But that impacted our output drastically by then. And this water problem is going to affect macroeconomically as well as on the food security wise badly to everyone. There are multiple sides to this problem.
Right.
I think one side is the land problem, because as we all know, about 80% of the land is owned by the government, that is including the rain cover and the forest and everything.
Right.
But when you do not really have the property rights for the people, it is very likely that the resources will be misallocated.
Right.
Because there is no one really to take care of the available resources.
Right.
At the same time, I think there are other sides, like sometimes these water resources are also divided between a lot of ministries, so no one really takes the responsibility. One side is with the irrigation ministry, another side with the archaeological ministry, and the other side with the agricultural ministry.
Right.
So all those multiple dimensions are there, but it's definitely everyone's problem.
And it is because you have this sort of blasé attitude sometimes. That people here will think, well, I can get my stuff in the supermarket. I've got eggs. And it's all there, but it's a bit expensive, but it's there. So how long does this attitude last? Because what happens in the end when the food supply, when the food chain is affected?
So multiple things can happen. One is when the prices increase, where you have to sacrifice or compromise some other way of expenditure.
Right.
To cover up your food expenditure. That's
Right.
one side. But that also affects mainly the most vulnerable people in Sri Lanka now. after the economic crisis, earlier there was about 3 million, and now 4 million have been added, or like the number has increased below the poverty line, which is to 7 million. Earlier it was 3 million, now it has almost more than doubled in the recent past. So those people will suffer, and they suffer from hunger with high food prices, and also the malnutrition can take place because, of course, with low protein content and the nutritional value. And one way basically the World Food Organization measure the food securities for us, it's not only the availability of food, it's the availability, the affordability, the nutritional content, all that is considered. So if we were to assure the food security, it is not just the prices, it is also the availability and the nutritional content. So we have to look at in a holistic point of view.
But I continue to get messages from the public and even letters addressed to me telling me that they can't afford to buy milk or eggs, and these are part and parcel of our youth's dietary requirements. There can be substantial damage to them in terms of stunted growth, reduced IQ, and so on. So the problem is just it's a waiting time bomb, isn't it?
Absolutely, Faraz. Yes, so basically the unaffordability affects everyone, as you very correctly mentioned. On those selected, like the product items or like food and the milk and eggs, I think there are also bad policy decisions that affected to what we experience at the same time, because if you recall, there was a price control at the beginning on eggs. Of course, I think there were unethical trade practices by the traders, but also because of the price control, some of the traders basically sold their farms, and basically the layer chicken, they have to give it away for meat. So as a result, even when you remove the price control, you really can't reactivate the entire supply chain over a few weeks. So as a result, the prices continue to increase, and now you have removed the price control, still the prices are going up. I think it has come down to a level because the imports were allowed. But this is a classic case of the mismanagement, or like how a bad policy decision, maybe it may have come with good intentions to bring down the policies, bring down the prices, but it has backfired on the other hand with very high prices.
And now we see that we saw a time some months ago when the exchange rate, when the rupee seemed to have gained and the value of the dollar came down, and everybody was very hopeful, and there was a lot of positivity floating around. But it's back to the bad old days again. And a lot of people predicted that this was only some temporary happening, but that actually it will go up. I remember talking to some very big businesses in this country, asking them what their forward outlook was, and they told me, well, it's not going to be there, it's going to be up there.
Absolutely, Farah. So when the economy recovers in the sense when the interest rates are coming down, and when people start spending even the little money that they have, the demand for imports are going to increase, and as a result, of course, the currency is going to depreciate, and that's what we experience. Even there will be temporary moments that it looks like it's appreciating, but even in the IMF projections, they have projected a depreciation of the currency throughout this year.
When does those projections, do they project when it might start turning the curve?
I think the projections are not very direct in the debt to GDP ratios and all that. When you do the back calculation, you can see their projections. So it is basically pretty much on a downward trajectory, because when you allow the credit cycle to grow, that means when you bring the interest rates down, people basically going to borrow more money, and when you borrow more money, they're going to build, they're going to swipe their credit cards. So then the demand for dollars is going to increase, and our exports, as we all know, it's in a declining trajectory. So of course there's a mismatch on the market side. So as a result, the currency has to depreciate unless the central bank intervenes and dilute their reserves and put it into the market and appreciate. But as we all know, we really do not have reserves to do that. So
what is the situation now? A lot of people say that with this domestic debt restructuring or optimization, lovely, I love that word, optimization, they say that the banks got away with it. One banker told me, with a lot of conviction, that, well, it's only numbers, and when you look at the real story, the banks don't make as much when you consider the level of assets that have been deployed, the capital deployed. If you look at that, then the rest is, it doesn't sound so good. What's your analysis of that?
My analysis is, for us, it's all when you look at on a comparative context.
Yeah.
With the domestic debt restructuring, of course, compared to the other stakeholders or the other creditor categories, of course, the banks got away and they are going to make a big margin because they were kept aside, because they were holding a significant proportion of the treasury bonds. So as a result, compared to the other credit holder, bond holders like the superannuation funds and ISBs, so they are going to get a big margin from there. At the same time, I think what bankers are saying is also not untrue, because compared to the investment that you have done, because it's not like someone getting just 5 rupees out of 100 rupee investment versus again someone getting 5 rupees out of 100,000 investment. There's a difference. So if you look at the banks, their investment is quite significant, because you have to have a branch network, it's very capital driven, and you have to keep, now the reserve rates have brought down, but even when you get a deposit, earlier you have to keep just 4 rupees at the central bank without getting any interest. So likewise, so their capital investment is also quite high. So if you look at comparatively, of course, with the restructuring, banks will gain. But and it was also proved just after the debt restructuring, the bank share prices went up. But overall, I think banks are also in a difficult period, because their non-performing loan ratio is in a is growing, because a lot of people who took moratoriums after the Easter attack, after the COVID, still I think it's not pretty much counting everything into the non-performing loan ratio. So they will have an impact on that, and also with the Sri Lanka development bonds restructuring, the banks will have another impact. So with the overall bad business environment, also the banks will have another impact. So overall, of course, though they are got away with the restructuring, they are also going through a bit of a difficult period, and also with the high interest rates, not because the bank's main way of income is the interest income. So when people are slow to get credit, take loans, that will also to an extent have an impact on their income.
So what is this business about the governor and the central bank telling the banks to bring it down? Doesn't he have to order them to bring the rates down?
He has to. I think that I think banks are also trying to, because of the current situation, they are also extending the time period without bringing the rates down. But on fairness to the bank side, for us, when you increase the interest rate, especially when they have taken deposits at higher interest rates, they have to do that calculation till some of those deposits, I mean, as overall as a base, when it comes down, when the maturity periods, considering that calculation only, they can slowly bring down the interest rates. But given the risk factors, they may also be keeping the interest rates high. But I don't think if they have the space, I think ideally the central bank should push to bring down the interest rates. I think that's one reason they bring down the standard reserve ratio, or SRR, from 4% to 2%, because that releases a lot of money which has been kept at the central bank towards the banks. So then they can extend more credit by bringing down the interest rates. So I think that must be the strategy. But that will also can have an impact on the rupee, or like the currency depreciation, if the central bank doesn't absorb that money by selling their treasury bills, because the more money in circulation in excessive amounts mean again more people are going to buy things and which will go out, or like which will increase the demand on the imports, which will have a higher demand on dollars and pressure on the currency.
So are you articulating a position where we'll be better off in a sort of manufactured recession?
To an extent for us, because the challenge is with the current situation, it's very difficult to operate as a business because the interest rates are high, so the manufacturers are finding it difficult. And at the same time, we are hitting an election cycle next year, so very likely that there will be some bad policy decisions being made.
Right.
So with that,
you mean they'll be trying to bribe the voters?
Absolutely. So that has been the practice by most of the governments.
And we have no evidence to suggest that that will change.
Absolutely. So in that sense, I am a little cautious with what you with the current situation. Only way out is for us by improving exports and basically going with the global trade.
But if we, Sri Lanka is mainly in terms of, our raw materials, we are mainly an agro industry here. So that means we have to import more things. I know the auto traders are simply waiting because they've been shut down for so long. Won't that have a detrimental effect on the reserves, and therefore our dollars, which is now worth about 335 in the unofficial market, might go back and hit the 400 mark or even more?
Yeah, that is why I mentioned that when you don't have that buffer capacity on the reserves, either you can do two things. One is you have to allow the currency to depreciate, or else again you have to increase the interest rates. But both will have its own consequences. If you increase the interest rates, again the businesses have to shrink and the economy will again.
So where's the median line?
Yeah, so it is. I think. Ideally, it is a very difficult balance to strike, and that's why it's called an economic crisis. And when you hit this level, it's very difficult to come back. But the solution to this problem is to focus mainly on the export side. And basically unlocking some of the land, because even for us, if you look at the occupancy of the free trade zones in the western province, about 95% of the land has been occupied. So even an investor comes with a foreign direct investment, which solves most of our dollar problems, they simply cannot find a land to do their investment. And also for the last 15 years, we haven't really started any BOI zones or free trade zones for investors to basically start any manufacturing. Nothing new. And also the investors won't just come just for the land. I mean, they want like a plug and play run, because you have to have the electricity, water, telecommunication services, everything where you basically can run the operation quite fast as soon as they set up, because money also has a time cost. So I think that's an area that we have to focus, because otherwise to reactivating this exports business is slightly difficult in this current context. So those are the easy things that we can do to quickly reactivate the economy.
On that note, let's go for a quick break, take a peek at this evening's headlines, and in a moment we'll be back in conversation with the CEO of Advocata Institute, Dhananath Fernando. See you on the other side of the break.
News First, Newsline with Faraz Shaukat Ali on TV1. News First, Newsline with Faraz Shaukat Ali on TV1.
The CEO of the Advocata Institute, Dhananath Fernando, is with us this evening, and the title was The Farmers' Problems Are Everyone's Problems, or will be. And so, Dhananath, I know we spoke at length in the first half, but where's the silver lining? Because we all want the silver lining.
I see there are two silver linings for us. One is, at least I am hopeful, the sentiment of the people are for governance structure reforms, because you can bring any type of best economic policies, but without the governance structure, we really cannot recover through a bad economic crisis, because there was a big corruption element, but I still hope, because people have been voicing it out. So that is one silver lining in terms of internal factors. In terms of the external factor for us, the second silver lining is growth in India, especially in the South Indian states.
Right.
Because they are growing. India has become the fastest growing economy, and at the same time they are now the largest population as a country in this region and in the world. So their growth, if we start to do more trade with India, I think there is a silver lining, because most of the high-tech companies, the automobile industry, that has just come to the next door.
Right.
It's just somehow capturing, like connecting with some of their supply chains. We really can't produce everything here.
Yeah.
If the automobile industry is growing, you are just finding just one simple component that we assemble here, manufacture here, and supply to them, and that's how you basically improve trade.
Right.
I think that's the silver lining. Even if we don't do anything, there's a higher chance that Sri Lanka can attract some of those investments. At the same time, I think if we do our policy right, because most of the Indian cities are also becoming somewhat unlivable because of the pollution level and with the climate change. So, but Sri Lanka, of course, we are also facing with a difficult time with climate change, but I think we are in a better position. So I think that the wealthiest people in India, I think we can attract them as a tourist destination, and also as a livable city, if we play our cards right. So that's the external factor that I see with the growth in India. And
of course, tourism can play a better part then.
Absolutely. Again, the tourism can play definitely a better part, but again, for us, the regulatory framework really doesn't support for our tourism to move forward.
Oh, really?
Because
what are the challenges?
I mean, in terms of, even if you look at the aviation side, and even the tariff structures at the airport, and the visa processes really doesn't help to attract more tourists.
Right.
I think we have to go for a more flexible and more open policy where we attract more tourists. For an example, a lot of countries, they have a visa process that if the tourist country's GDP is 2 times or 3 times higher than your country, you just allow them to come.
Okay.
So I think those policies hopefully will help
sort
us.
of a visa-free travel.
Not visa-free, but again for selected countries, of course, with high GDP, you just allow them, because then we are coming to the radar of the set of consideration.
Right.
And at the same time, I think the tariff rates are still very high at the Colombo airport compared to the compared to the region. And I think there are a lot of monopoly activities taking place at the same time.
At the same time.
So I think those are the areas that we have to consider, because we have to go for easy regulate, because we really do not have money nor the time to do massive changes at this short period of time. So we have to basically go for more regulatory changes which can be easily done at this point of time for a quick recovery.
And also, I suppose that we need to bear in mind, but let me ask you the question though, what about the acceptance of the Indian rupee? How will that affect us?
I think in terms of trade, it's already there because the banks are now accepting, especially for trade.
Right.
I think that would help, because first it will bring down the cost for the traders, and it will also reduce the transaction time.
Right.
So in that sense, I think it's a positive indicator in my view, but I know it's not also the popular view amongst many, because sometimes you scare about the sovereignty issue and you're trading with different currencies and all that. But I think the world has now moved, even people are trading with Bitcoin and digital currencies at the same time. So I think the world has moved to using multiple currencies. But I think it's a positive sign, but what we need to capitalize is on to do more trade, like to find out more export markets and start trading more with India, because there are successful companies who have been in India, like our apparel sector, some of our manufacturing, the electronic manufacturers are there, even some of the salon chains are in India as a service sector, in the service sector. So it is, we definitely can explore the Indian market and get more trade, but it is just the courage, and the regulatory framework should enhance for our business community to explore the Indian market.
Good. So there is some silver lining around there, but honestly we should all be aware that the problems of the farmers are not just the farmers' problems. It has effects that will trickle down to urban levels as well.
Absolutely, urban level, and also the most vulnerable people in the society. So everyone, it's farmers' problems, and the water problem is everyone's problem, and we all should prioritize that problem, because it can also drip down to an electricity crisis and so on and so forth with the current situation. So we all have to be very careful and provide the priority, because farmers' problems is everyone's problem.
We've got a couple of minutes. Let me ask you this question on regulation and deregulation. In your view, is Sri Lanka too regulated? Like, you know, you were talking about the cost, the challenges to the aviation and in tourism. For example, Sri Lankan Airlines has a monopoly situation in the airport. Is that bad for attracting business?
Yes, for us, because any monopoly, it could be government or private sector monopoly, it is bad, because you are basically not allowing the pricing mechanism to work, and you are allowing someone to take a super profit because of the not being able to compete with the other players. Definitely there are so many regulations for us. Even if you go and start setting up a small business, when you go to register, it is pretty much very difficult to register a business as a partnership or as a sole proprietorship. And even for an investor, there are about 16 licenses that they have to take when they are setting it up. So even if you take like 3 days for a license, each license, 16 licenses with Saturdays, Sundays, it takes quite a long time.
Right.
So it is very difficult, but the other countries are moving with multiple options, like Vietnam and players in the region, Thailand. They have better options for to attract investors with minimum number of licenses and minimum lead time. So we have to compete with them, otherwise we will not be able to attract the investors, because they have, Sri Lanka is not the only destination for them. They have multiple options in the region now.
I was abroad. I noticed that even the street busker playing the music to passers by, he had a tripod, and set up on that was a payment card, you know. So if you wanted to donate anything in this move towards cashless society, you just take your card and click it and donate however much you want. So I mean, even that has gone high tech now.
Absolutely. So but we are quite distant from online payments, digital payments, because of the regulation. If you start trying to set up a online payment platform, that process sometimes is quite difficult to set it up. So we have to. That's why I said the regulatory framework has to change to enhance the growth for Sri Lanka to come out from this crisis.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for having been my guest, Dhananath Fernando, the CEO of Advocate Institute.
Thank you for that.
And it's now time for the Primetime News. Tonight, it's the delightful Naveksha Gunasekara who's reading you the news tonight. And of course, not before I say, have a great evening as much as you can, and God bless you all.